Hello and welcome back, everyone. You guys seem to like the discussion slash feedback that we gave to the developers when they were asking for feedback for diplomacy last Friday, and now they're asking for more feedback. They're approaching us once again, except by us, I mean everyone, and they want feedback regarding politics. Now, we are going to be filling out this feedback forum. However, if you are interested in giving feedback yourself, please pause / stop this video and give the feedback before watching the video. Generally speaking, when you are trying to get feedback and impressions from a group of people, the feedback is more substantive and more useful if those people do not talk to each other first, because the power of groups and drawing from a large pool of people is more powerful if they do not discuss beforehand, because they tend to taint each other's opinions. And so if you want to do that, either do that or pause the video and do that first, or just click out of the video and do that instead. This sort of type of thing. But we will be giving feedback on the politics in this video here, and we're kind of walking through it. So Victoria 3 Feedbacks Forum. We've been collecting feedback on the current implementation of politics in Victoria 3, and looking for what the community feels, common pain points, and what you would like to see changed and improved. I actually have a bit of my feedback, generally speaking, regarding politics is probably going to overall be a bit of meta feedback, which is, generally speaking, they have worked on politics in a way that, to me, is not a good prioritization. So they've done big political reworks in 1.3 and also in 1.8, and I have felt at the times that politics has kind of been in an okay-ish place, regardless, although there's some weird, abdication was just this super abusive mechanic you could use in 1.7, and now it's not abusive in the same way. But in either case, I think that generally they keep working on politics when politics is not the piece of the game that needs the most work. And so my meta-level feedback in a general sense is stop focusing on politics so much, rather than instead fix the diplo play. And also, that for me is the most frustrating thing, but for a lot of other people, the military is the most frustrating thing. Or in terms of the feedback I see, overwhelmingly people would prefer military fixes over political reworks. Even if the reworks are really good, I definitely do like the reworks for movements for politics, and 1.3 I definitely like the rework that they did back then. The point is less on the substance of the thing and more on the frame of focus of the development team. I think is perhaps a little bit too much on politics, or I would allocate resources differently, I think. This is, of course, without me knowing exactly what's going on inside the development team, and I can't necessarily, I don't know, maybe politics changes are really easy to do, and fixing the warfare is really hard to do, and so from an efforts to output perspective, it actually makes more sense to fix politics, and I'm just ignorant in that regard. But if that's not the case, then I'd rather see work on other stuff. But okay, let's get into it. This survey will stay live until February the 28th, or until the Friday the 28th of February, 11 a.m. CET. Then it will be closed and you will be unable to. For the purposes of the survey here, we have split the survey into 4 sections. You are here, the starting page gives some quick feedback on politics overall. Internal politics feedback asks questions about the things that make up the internal politics, such as interest groups, political movements, and elections. Character feedback asks questions about the various types of characters you'll engage with in the game, such as politicians, agitators, and commanders. Laws and institution feedback asks a question about the various laws, institutions, and decrees that you can act with your nation. All feedback questions on the forum are optional, and we will ask you before each section if you want to answer it. If not, just skip to the next. You may return to it if you wish to add or change your feedback at any time before the closing mentioned date above. It is important to note that this is not a guarantee of a rework or that will happen at some point. It is only to collect feedback in a single place for the developers to review. Incidentally, I think the fact that they're doing multiple of these suggests that patch 1.9 will be pushed pretty far back and will be also quite a large patch, or this kind of implies that. Either that or they're almost done with 1.9 and this is prepping for 1.10. So based on this, how many hours of Victoria 3 we've played? Okay, over 36. This is true. Oh, that joke never gets old. It's roughly 3,500. How much do you feel about, or how much do you like the current implementation of politics of Victoria 3? So I definitely think that this is one of the stronger points of the game. Some of the emergent, kind of things happening as a result of tracking the pops very closely, tracking their economic conditions, and then having their professions, their literacy, and it's mainly professions and literacy inform their politics, but also there's like layers with agitators, political movements, and various other things. And so, generally speaking, I do like the politics in Victoria 3, and so we're going to rate it a 7. I want to remind everyone that when we are rating things 1 through 10, we are rating in such a way that we are trying to make the average score a 5 or a 5.5, with the idea being that if you're not using the entire spectrum, you're losing it, and also feedback probably should fall on a normal distribution curve where most of your feedback, should be like 5s and 6s or 4 to 7 if you want it to look like a normal performance distribution curve, which is probably where in actuality of performance tends to fall on a normal distribution curve. When you look at feedback, it falls on like an inverse of a normal distribution curve, because very often people will only leave feedback if they really love something or really hate it. We're looking at you, restaurants and Yelp, where like all the reviews are 5s or 1s. But anyways, if this was 1 out of 10, we would give it, well, let's not make the 3.6 Ronkin joke. What would you like to be able to do politically that you currently can't in Victoria 3? I want culture to matter. I would like to see maybe jingoist populations. Populations are more war-prone, for example. But this is kind of outside the scope of politics. Also, debt slavery shouldn't be locked. Debt slavery should not lock out of multiculturalism. So currently, if you are on debt slavery, you can't pass multiculturalism. Can't do the capitalist hellscape where every type of economic relation is possible because you can't pass debt slavery. And I think that this is kind of a little bit of silliness because, equal opportunity, it just matters your economic class, whether or not you become a slave. We're not bringing race or anything like that into this, and so debt slavery shouldn't lock out multiculturalism as in terms of laws. This is kind of a small thing, but we wanted to do a capitalist hellscape run for some time where we go debt slavery, and so the fact that multiculturalism locks this out is a little bit, okay. So, did we click next? Indicates required question. For the purposes of, okay, so this is a split survey. For the purposes of the survey, we've split it into 4 sections. We're now here at internal politics. Asks a question about things that make up internal politics, such as etc. I think that we can skip through this. All feedback's optional. Yes, let me fill in internal politics. All right. Alright, this section asks questions about the things that make up internal politics, such as interest groups, political movements, and elections. All answers are optional. How effective are interest groups in Victoria 3 at representing diverse political factions within your nation? How effective are interest groups? The interest groups tend to feel monolithic. And they tend to feel monolithic in... They're not very dynamic. They don't update in response to stuff, and they're very, very samey across nations. So I actually think that they're really bad at representing diversity of opinions, especially on the point of a singular agitator overrides the ideology of the entire IG, which means that whoever's leader of the IG super overinforms what that IG is about. Like, if you had someone rise to the power of the Industrialists, right, and then they're a reformer, not all industrialists will be on board with reform, but that's how things get represented in game as they become leader, and suddenly they're willing to do a whole bunch of reforms that the industrialists otherwise really oppose. And so as a system, I think that the singular leader leading, an interest group that has like 30% of the power of the nation is one in which specifically diverse political factions or the political factions themselves are not diverse, but I guess you have a diversity of options. I think the Better Politics mod does a good option at basically just doubling to tripling the number of interest groups to make everything feel a lot more granular. I think we're going to give this a 3. What is your reasoning for above? IGs are same-ish for all nations and not dynamic. So this is thing 1. There's some exceptions to this where different IGs, if you have a unique IG, they will care a little bit differently in other nations. But even then, they're like locked in. Also, overinforms what the entire group thinks. Diversity between multiple IGs is okay. But the fact is, like, the industrialists are the same for, like, everyone. And they don't evolve or develop. Something that the Better Politics mod does that's interesting is that they have IGs that aren't present at game start appear as the result of researching technology or having certain political movements, and I think that this is a pretty good way of implementing things. Oop. We meant to move something else over in our recording. I think we have some of that cut off a little bit. Okay. How do you feel about the following statement? Interactions with interest groups provide meaningful challenges and opportunities. This is probably mostly disagree. We don't have too many, well, we have a few interactions, but we can't, like, proactively do stuff or manage stuff or anything like that. It's mainly just the only, like, real, you can exile people, you can hire specific generals. Generals, as in terms of a simulation, are probably overrepresented in terms of their importance in politics. But the main interactions are just exile. And I think that there's not a lot of depth or management besides that. To what extent do current interactions with interest groups influence your strategic decisions? I think a decent extent, because they're so critical for passing laws, or changing the ideology of your leader is pretty important for passing laws. IG leaders. Important for passing laws, generally. Generally speaking, this is the case, and so you do manage it to some extent. But I think other than that, like, often they'll take a little bit of a backseat. You can also promote certain movements to be a little bit more active. Or if you promote a movement, then you can make it so you're more likely to roll certain ideologies on people. So, like, to some extent, that's another axis by which you can interact. But, like, it's a very passive type of... you have most of... let's slightly feedback on this. So, bolster movements. But this, as an interaction... feels relatively passive. Use the right affecting. Do interest groups feel like actors in their own right? No, not really. I don't... Maybe they do. I mean, like, it doesn't feel like there's no, like, narrative type of feeling to them. They're just equilibriums. So, we'd rate this relatively low. I mean, it does feel like they care about stuff. They have revolutions. They respond to stuff. We're gonna rate this relatively low. Can you give an example why you think above? There's like, they're kind of just an amorphous. There isn't really much in the way of a narrative feel for an IG over time, really. And instead what it just feels like, they feel like an amorphous, like, equilibrium. That just tracks your pops. How realistic are the dynamics of political parties in Victoria 3? So political parties, specifically they're talking about the multiple parties joining together in terms of interest groups and this type of stuff. We'll put a 4. It's a little bit binary whether or not the IGs join parties. I think is probably the main idea here, where either the party is going to have a bunch of people join in them, or they're not, and in reality, interest groups would be split between parties, and it wouldn't be this entire, like, winner takes all. It's a very winner take all. Although I understand that's how elections work, like the winner does in fact take the bag, but it's the distribution of the power of an IG. Let's maybe clarify. And I don't think that that's necessarily realistic. How significantly do election outcomes affect your nation's policies and direction? I mean, they're kind of just an extension of clout. It's somewhat significantly. It feels like an extension of clout. But it affects who can be in Gov and stay at a reasonable legitimacy. However, it feels like it's locked in on clout. And only sometimes informed by dynamic IG behavior. Generally speaking, the IGs don't, you don't see, like, an alliance of convenience, like, sprout up. Well, I mean, sometimes you do when an IG leader takes over their group, and they have, like, let's say the reformer industrialist takes over, and then you get a political party with the industrialists and the intelligentsia together, and then maybe they can win an election, and then you can slot them in, and this type of thing, but it doesn't feel like when it does, an IG leader super overinforms the preferences of the IG. How satisfied are you with the party election mechanics in Victoria 3? I'm satisfied. I wouldn't put very satisfied. I think we kind of have a lot of lowish scores here, but they're kind of middling scores as well. So, middling lowish. What is your reasoning for above? It works. It's reasonable. How clear are the objectives and demands of political movements within the game? Man, oh man, are they really clear? I don't know if they could be more clear. They're extremely clear. They're clear. They usually they be about their business. They want what they want, and they let you know. It's like, I want this law. And also, like, the movements, they're like, we want this series of laws. Is there any ambiguity we can even possibly think of? I mean, like, so sometimes a group will be upset because all of its pops are radicalizing, because they're discriminated against or something like this, and despite you having the exact laws that they want, they're still radicalizing. Maybe that's an example of them being unclear. How challenging is the managing of political movements and revolutions? Probably say not that challenging. You could do gimmicky stuff like fake pass laws in order to make movements like not be so upset over the time. We'll put 4. What's your reasoning for above? How challenging is the... I don't really have a special large reasoning. You have a lot of tools. If you understand how the system works and you have a lot of tools, you almost never get in trouble. I'm trying to... I mean, like... To some extent, the quicker you change stuff, the more easy it is to get into trouble, but, like, really there's a whole lot of things that you can do to just, like, literally pass every law that you want. Or your pops will never get so upset from your political movements, even as you're passing as many laws as you want, if you're kind of just, like, smart about it. I guess the being smart about it, though, is part of the system. Like, sometimes you don't do stuff because you're going to trigger a rev. Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to get into trouble, too much trouble. Do political movements or revolutions feel like actors in their own right? A little bit. It's either 6 or 7 here, I think. They do feel, like... It does feel like they have a little bit of a sense of agency. We'll give this a 7. I do think that they feel like a force that's, like, kind of coming about. The thing is like, it feels a lot of... There's maybe not enough of a randomness factor or a culture informing factor. They can often feel the same between runs. And so I think that would be like a little bit of feedback to leave, but I do think that they overall kind of feel like actors. Overall, how well did the previous mentioned mechanics work up to make up internal politics? I mean, we scored relatively low on a lot of these, except for, like, the clarity, but overall, pretty satisfied with internal politics. There's nothing in the system that is just operating in, like, an incoherent or crazy way that, like, is just immersion breaking or is fundamentally a really bad gameplay pattern. So we're gonna give it a pretty high score here. Either an 8 or a 9, probably a 9. Rate the overall UX of internal politics. I think it's pretty good. Rate the overall AI handling of internal politics. AI is kind of stagnant. AI feels very stagnant and doesn't like, yeah. Do you have any current pain points with internal politics not mentioned above? I don't think so. Overall, pretty satisfied. Let's leave that for other thoughts, comments, concerns. Nothing really frustrating. Although, to be fair, to someone with fewer hours, it might be very frustrating. But nothing frustrating. The systems operate and function. My concern would be... my only concern is that politics, internal, get prioritized in terms of dev resources. I think the system's functional. Functional. There we go. Okay. So, there we have the internal politics section. Overall, relatively satisfied with it. And I think that... I mean, so, like... randomness can be removed from law passes, I suppose. Better politics mod. Has an interesting way of addressing this. In general, I do think Better Politics mod does have better internal politics, but it's, I think for a newer player, that political system is just like, you open it, it's just absolutely overwhelming. And once you play it a little bit, it makes a lot of sense. And so I think that overall the system is a little bit better, but I also think that this is not like a painful point of Victoria 3, and overall we're pretty happy with things. As it relates to internal politics. So we'll click next, and then we will say, let me put in feedback for characters. How clear is your understanding of the different character roles, IG rulers, interest-group leaders? How clear is your understanding? I think it's real clear. We could tell who's who and what's what, yeah. What is your reasoning for the above? I have 3,500 hours. UI isn't ambiguous. I guess occasionally we do have like someone being a leader that like, or occasionally on some instances someone being a leader slash ruler, we get caught by surprise a little bit. But I think that's just us not paying attention, not us like trying to figure something out. So maybe we'll put it as a 9, but like overall it's just very clear. To what extent do individual characters influence your strategic decision? We're gonna put it as a 7, specifically manipulating IG, leadership, or politics. This is the biggest one. If wars are super close, managing character traits. Fishing traits on leaders. Mainly cautious. And, what's the literate one? Literary. Okay, so these are... I know I put literal there, that's the joke. Okay, so these are kind of the things in which characters influence strategic decisions. The fact that I think it's super informed by, like, leadership traits or traits in a really binary way. Either you don't care at all or you super care. Like, this kind of feels a little bit bad. It does influence strategic decisions, though. In your opinion, order the character roles in terms of how important they are. 1 being most important and 4 being less important. This one's a little bit tough, actually, because you're kind of... I would love to separate this into two questions. How important are they, and how important would you like them to be? How important are they? Interest group leaders just have to be the most important one. And then, here's the thing. Agitators allow you to change the interest group leader, and this would make agitators number 2. We're going to answer in such a way that we are assuming that that is not part of the consideration of agitators, because that's an extension of interest group leaders being important. But being able to manipulate and change who is in charge of an interest group is kind of the most important thing. So we'll put rulers second, and then agitators, and then commanders. Fundamentally speaking, like, character traits, like, matter on commanders, but commanders aren't, like, an active part of any type of, like, they influence politics because if they give a percentage modifier to clout, and to this extent they influence politics, but they're not active agents in politics or anything internal really at all. And so commanders are relatively unimportant unless you have wars that are close. So for multiplayer, this would be number 1. Commanders would be number 1 in multiplayer. But as it stands, you don't have really close wars ever in Victoria 3, and when there's no close wars, commanders just kind of become unimportant in terms of character traits and you really caring about them. I mean, there's things you could do. You can engage and really push towards too. I suppose with a higher infamy playstyle, commander traits start to matter a lot more, but I just think that they... do you feel that the order you put them in makes sense? Why would I not put them in an order like that? Okay, well, what's this question probably more asking? Do you feel that this is the way it should be? I think that agitators should be the most important, and then probably rulers, and then interest group leaders, and then commanders, maybe. We're gonna put no opinion here, because this is a weird question. I don't know exactly. I think this is asking... do you feel that how this is the system as it is? Do you think this is the way the system should be? And honestly, I don't have a super strong opinion on which should be most important. If you had to put no for the above question, what do you think can be changed to improve it? Well, we didn't put no, but commanders feel unimportant unless you have super close wars. Generally speaking, commanders are mainly useful insofar as you can make them IG leader. You generally don't care too much. I mean, like, agitators will agitate and do things, but ruler traits often feel like rulers traits are important in a very binary way. And what I mean by this is, like, if your ruler is bandit, cautious, reckless, or literary, you have an opinion on this. If it's not any one of those, you're just kind of like, eh. I mean, expensive tastes is bad, too, I suppose, but it's just this weird character trait farming, type of thing, whereas, the other ones are ideology farming. So why don't we put, and then clarify that what we mean is you're either ideology farming or trait farming. How easy is it to manage and interact with the various characters in game? I'd say it's easy. We don't have too many options, but, like, it's not difficult to do. Do characters feel like an actor in their own right? Not really, unless they're an agitator. To a lesser extent, IG leader. For the most part, they don't really do things. Do things in a way informed by traits or ideology. Your generals don't do anything because of their ideology. I mean, sometimes you get events. I guess maybe... I think there's some events tied to certain traits that you occasionally roll. I know that you can, you get expensive tastes, or, there are some conditions that give you expensive tastes. I think taking war reps off of someone might be one of them. I can't remember. You usually end up getting expensive tastes on your rulers, and it's annoying. But there's no... the ingress for characters is very narrow in scope, which I don't necessarily have too much a problem with. It's not like you're playing CK or something where you're playing an RPG game. The characters are peripheral, but the characters don't really do stuff unless they are an agitator or interest group leader. Overall, how satisfied are you with the portrayal and functionality of characters in the game? I'd say we're slightly satisfied. Not dissatisfied. We're kind of a little bit neutral. I do wish that there was culture in game, and that characters influence culture and had a big effect on culture. But I think that this is outside the scope of what do we think of characters. This is talking about an entire another system, and then latching characters onto there. I also think that having the rich capitalists acquire more and more money and run companies, and then as they acquire a bigger and bigger market share, they start to meddle in politics or something like this. I think that this would be cool, but again, this is outside the scope of the game, or I think this is outside the scope of what they're asking questions about, where most of the functionality of characters that we would like to see is adding new areas of ingress for the characters, and the characters seem kind of like a scaffold and a shell that just is under-implemented. But, okay. For characters overall, how would you rate the roleplay perspective? Well, the roleplay perspective's awful, right? But we're not super RPG heavy. Or roleplay heavy. I mean, occasionally you get one agitator that you just to the extent that it feels like you're role-playing, it feels like just memeing. You get Lincoln and then you make Lincoln jokes. I don't think... They don't feel very role-play heavy, honestly. I think we're going to rate this pretty low. I think that it as a cog within the machine of the simulation that is primarily tracking pops and having the pops have emergent politics and having the characters be a cog in the machine of the pop-oriented game, I think that it's fine. But from the perspective of characters feel like they have personality and flavor and roleplay and this type of stuff, it's basically non-existent. In terms of how we would rate it, I'm also maybe the wrong person to ask on this, because the spreadsheets, dog. This is for me, what I care about is the economic simulation more than can I roleplay with the characters. I don't think the roleplay with the characters is very good. Rate the user experience of characters, probably kind of okay. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to find. It can feel a little bit hard to find and sort generals and stuff, and look through ideologies and check this. Rate the AI handling of characters in Victoria 3. I don't really know how they handle characters all that well. I know so the AI doesn't play intelligently, but you don't necessarily want them to play intelligently. Otherwise, Great Britons would force Charles Dickens every game, and then conquer the whole world really fast, which would be a meme, if they behaved intelligently. We're just gonna put a 5. Don't really have an opinion. slash, I guess, slightly negative. Do you have any current pain points when handling characters not mentioned above? Do we have any pain points not mentioned above when handling characters? I don't really think so. It just no points of pain, but I think they're underutilized in general. Like, they can fit into other systems better. In more systems better. And then they could also... For the most part, it's just like you either care about an ideology or trait, or you like, you either care about an ideology or trait, or you ignore the mechanics completely. Oh my god. They generally, from a gameplay perspective, like, we're kind of ignoring them. And I don't know to what extent they want characters to be more in the forefront or in the background. So this is maybe a question of, like, game design philosophy, because if you're trying to focus on the pops, then the thing you would actually want to do is you would want to have better systems in the UI for managing and tracking and representing change in pops' opinions and behavior over time, rather than having... Or like, in terms of a prioritization. But if you want, like, so I think characters being a driving force and having a massive paradigm shift, maybe we put this in. I don't necessarily want this, but I think making characters more focal and a huge driving point would make the game like, this would be a huge design philosophy overhaul. Because currently, like, it just seems like the focal point doesn't seem on characters at all. They feel like kind of a little bit of an afterthought. We don't have a strong opinion too much, other than, actually, not much points of pain. There is one. What is it? Ideology. I think the ideology of the IG leader over-informs politics. But I think if you want to make the game a lot more mainstream, feeling like you could have designed a game about the Victorian era that was about characters with massive personalities and this type of stuff. Especially because, like, Hitler's within the scope of the game, man. I mean, he's just barely within the scope of the game, but, like, you could have... Well, I guess you would want to kick the... You would maybe want to make the game a little bit longer, but, like, you have, like, guys like Freud and Lenin and Marx, and you could, like, make it so that you could make characters just so much more a focal point, and they just kind of feel like window dressing for the most part. You know, in terms of how they feel from a gameplay perspective, which isn't necessarily a problem. Like, if you want to focus on the economic systems and the way they intermesh, which is kind of what I care about, it's not as much a problem. But if you're trying to appeal to a wider audience, being more character driven would probably be much better, I would think. This is more like feedback that I kind of like would rather not see implemented, but is maybe the type they would like. Do we want to give feedback regarding laws and institutions? Yes. How clear is the process of enacting laws in game? I'd say it's kind of clear. I do think that there's some problems in regards to enacting laws, in that there's like a randomness chance. There's some UI bugs in regards to like law pass chance. In that if you get positive modifiers to passing laws while passing a law, when you look for passing another law, it'll show the positive modifier being applied. I think that the system maybe feels frustrating because it's a percentage chance. It's not necessarily super, like, it's in the UI. You could tell whether or not you rolled advance, like an advance event, or sorry, not an advance event, a stall event, or a different type of event. Like, it says it in the UI, but it's, like, maybe a little bit not so clear. You know, there's some UI bugs. Some things are unclear. Notably the bug where enactment chance events are applied in the UI to when looking at laws, at passing laws you're currently not, is still in the game. So sometimes we get bamboozled. We look and we see, hey, we can try and pass something, and then bam, they get us. But overall, like, it says there's going to be a chance. You can hover over things. You can see why there's a chance. Stuff's relatively clear. So we'll put it at a 6, just slightly above average. How significantly do interest groups impact your ability to pass laws? What? What is this question? Basically entirely. Outside of strong movements. How satisfied are you with the variety and relevance of laws available in the game? It seems like there's kind of clear meta that's the same for every country. And that doesn't feel very good. And so I don't, like, I mean, there are options, but none of them feel like legitimate options, really, in terms of what's going on, in terms of, like, what's effective. And maybe this is just having too many hours in the game and kind of, like, understanding stuff. But often just, like, it feels really bad to do anything but meta. And the meta is the same for every country. And yeah, I mean, like, it really feels like, variety and relevance, it feels like there's no variety, or we're just memeing and we're doing something that's intentionally bad. Probably a 2. How well do you understand the effects of institution on your nation? Probably pretty high. We make videos about this type of stuff. I don't like these types of questions, though. How well do you understand something? The problem with these types of questions in general is, you know, if you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, I read about it the other day. It's when you have, you know, when you have a very small knowledge in something, you tend to really, really overestimate your belief in it, which is why, in tomorrow, or today rather, we're going to be making a video on the Dunning-Kruger effect. Because we have so much to say about it, because we're quite knowledgeable about the Dunning-Kruger effect. We read about it yesterday, but I think we know what's going on. But the idea is, there's your opinion of your knowledge. We have to reverse it, because as you learn stuff, your opinion of your knowledge goes way up, and then you begin to realize how little you know, and then it comes way down, and then as you become a real legitimate expert, it comes back up. And so the confidence you have in your understanding of anything, because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, is going to be one in which your confidence is actually a poor barometer of how much you actually know. Often, if you feel really confident about something and you've never felt like, man, I don't understand this at all, you're probably at like the Mount Stupid, where you like have built up you've built up like some knowledge, but you haven't had the trough of like self-doubt. You have to pass through the trough of self-doubt, and then eventually you get more towards mastery. So if you feel like you really understand something, but you've never felt like, man, I'm really stupid and I don't understand this, you're probably on Mount Stupid. And then you got to come down into the trough of, I know nothing. How well do you understand the effect of different institutions? I think we understand the institutions. We hate the question, though. Because this is a question that incites thoughts about the nature of knowledge and confidence in that knowledge, and this is way beyond the scope of this video or questionnaire. We don't have examples. Well, I do have examples. I make videos on the game, but that feels tongue-in-cheek to kind of put into that. How do you feel about the following statement? It's easy to adjust and manage the levels of various institutions. I'd mostly agree. I think. We click a button, they trend towards the thing. We click a button. Yeah, it's easy to adjust, but not very granular, I suppose. To what extent does institutions influence your overall gameplay strategy? They're pretty important. What's your reasoning? They're pretty important. Education makes certain groups more politically active and also affects research speed. And then also health, the health system is really important for pop growth, this type of stuff. Colonization obviously lets you colonize. They're important. They're just quite important. I don't know. There's not much strategic decision making. In the mechanic, though, because meta doesn't vary. There's not much variety in the what the mechanic, what is meta, there's basically no variety in what's meta, so it's the same institutions. So just same institutions every game. Other than if you have more peasants, you'll have fewer institutions. This is the one kind of adjustment that you make, is if you the benefit of the cost of institutions scales with population, right? But the benefit scales more It still scales with population, but it scales more closely with your like GDP per capita or your GDP. And so as you have a really low GDP per capita, institutions will be less valuable, but they will be the same cost. And then as you have a high GDP per capita, they'll get more valuable. But this is the like kind of only granularity. So if you're playing China, you use way fewer institutions, for example. And if you're playing Belgium, you use all the institutions. But the choices you make in regards to outside the scope of that, it's just like kind of run the same ones over and over and over again. Unless you're like, I mean, you can do an RP play, and you can go like all the religious schools and this type of stuff. So maybe I'm not the person to ask for this type of feedback, because like one thing's just better, and it just feels like we just do that same thing over and over and over. How clear are the functions of, and effects of decrees? I'd say they're pretty clear. They do what they say they're gonna do. I suppose my one complaint, they're clear. For a new player, actually, let's reduce this. Though, equilibriums often put in don't feel good because you don't have feedback. Education access, for example, takes time to ramp up. And you don't feedback from your actions to increase it. And to some extent, some of these institutions are affecting this specifically. I think they're relatively clear and the effects are clear. How often do we utilize decrees to influence state development? It's very nearly always. I really hate this type of... Generally speaking, I don't like absolute language, but to the extent that we're trying to fill out the poll and give good information, we like always utilize decrees. Not a lot. How easy is it to interact various decrees? Various? Like multiple? I'd say it's pretty easy. These questions, I think, like, don't really fit with decrees. Any feedback or suggestions regarding the last two questions? I'm not sure. I'm actually like not sure what you're asking. Like, how often do we use decrees? And clicking the buttons is easy. Yeah, I mean, I actually don't know what they're asking here. I feel like they're asking something that is beyond like the scope of like what I'm trying to answer. It's easy to click the buttons to put decrees in. I mean, the amount of decrees you can do scales with your authority. You have other demands on your authority, but for the most part, like, I mean, these demands will scale. The usefulness of decrees scales, like, or negatively scales with the amount of states you have. So as you have more states, decrees become irrelevant, or closer and closer to irrelevant. But, like, yeah, I don't know. How satisfied are you with the variety of decrees available? I think the variety is not necessarily the problem. So we'll put slightly unsatisfied. I do think the decrees leave a lot more to be desired. The variety is kind of fine. But we have some other problems with decrees. First is seeing a religion is really hard without migration, and the decree that gives second decrees scale in an unsatisfying way. in that as you get more states, they get worse. Yeah, so if you have a single state, man oh man, are decrees insane because they just apply to your entire country, right? But if you have 100 states and they're all equal in size, decrees become like basically useless. And so I think that decree costs should maybe scale with the percentage of pop that they're being applied to. So if you're choosing a state that has 100% of your pops, the decree should be really expensive. If you're choosing a state that only has like, or you could scale it like so it's not just completely linear. Like maybe there's a base of 50, cost of 50 for a decree, right? And then an additional 50 proportionate to the amount of population that's being applied to, something like this. But having it just it makes decrees really suck when you're like, if you're playing like Russia, for example, decrees feel really bad because you have a bunch of really solid states and you have to spread out a bunch of your building in terms of that state. And so they just like don't feel like, it feels like you lose that mechanic as an outlet for your authority. Whereas like something like the UK, especially because you get a lot of authority with the UK because of vassalization, you just like put it down a ton of decrees on 3 to 5 states on the British Isle, and they're really, really strong, but it's because you have a smaller number of states. And so it creates some like really unsatisfying play patterns. I think that could probably be solved with a little bit of a fix. But the variety of the decrees is not as much the problem for me. I suppose there's like not too many choices, and maybe we would like more choices in this type of stuff. There's a mod that introduces more decrees that I think is probably fine enough. I think that it's probably unbalanced though. Well, I guess balance is kind of whatever. How satisfied with you are how laws, institutions, decrees fit into politics as a whole? Let's say I'm pretty satisfied. Something that I'm not satisfied about is authority just feels really bad as a resource, just kind of generally. The AI's handling of laws, institutions, and decrees in Victory 3. We'll just put a 4. I think that from a simulation perspective, they probably do okay. They don't play very strong. I think that is fine. Do you have any current points when talking about laws, institutions, and decrees not mentioned above? Yeah, authority as a resource feels pretty bad. I mean, you often, in the early game, you float it, then you use it to apply consumption taxes, which is, like, kind of a strangeness, and then you use it for decrees. It just, yeah, authority, I mean, like, the floating it to pass laws faster is fine. I think you should be able to use it to, like, exile agitators more. And imprison agitators and do this type of stuff. I think it should be usable for character interaction to override cooldowns. And also scaling on what is it? Edicts can be improved. For high state countries. Consumption taxes is also a weird outlet. From a simulation perspective. This is the classic complaint of I need to be more racist so I can tax grain. Just absolutely not making sense whatsoever. Like as a simulation, kind of don't hate it being from a gameplay perspective. Don't hate it being an outlet for authority. I think this is fine because generally speaking, consumption taxes are good. You would consumption tax a whole bunch of stuff and just have a lower tax rate. Generally speaking, is like a strong thing. But authority, like just it just doesn't feel very good as a resource. And authority, like, should interact, I think, a lot more with laws, institutions, and decrees. Other thoughts, comments, concerns regarding laws, institutions, and decrees? Not especially. Oh yeah, debt slavery. You know, equal opportunity, you can enter in this contract, right? This contract where you sell yourself into indentured servitude. There's nothing racial about that. Well, okay, in terms of how it ended up playing out in actuality, there's definitely some there, but what I'm saying is the mechanic as an institution of the government allowing the selling of into indentured servitude is actually this is an interesting opportunity for like an emergent kind of gameplay pattern, because if you discriminate on the basis of race, you pay lower wages. So it's actually easier for people to go into debt slavery, right? Because they'll be in a lower wage bracket. But if you have multiculturalism, like if you're well and proper multicultural, then you wouldn't have this effect where the racial discrimination is causing this. And so you could see the proportion of pops that are going into slavery change as you become more and more accepting of other cultures, and this type of thing would maybe be interesting. But yeah, fundamentally speaking, like we do have a little bit of complaint there. Debt slavery and multiculturalism should be compatible. Do we have a complaint about any of the other laws? Specifically, let's think. Separation of power. Anarchy is useless, but it probably should be useless. That's like a meme law. I'm super okay with that. Just trying to think through like the entire left side of the tree. We have like the balance of power laws, the voting laws. This is maybe something we should have the game open for, to be honest. Just trying to think through. Like, there's nothing on the left column that really strikes me as problematic. So like in the center column, you have like economic system, which laissez-faire is unambiguously best, but we don't really have a problem with that. I think it should be best. Actually, monopolistic power. And there should be represent, because if I'm not mistaken on my history, which I don't think I am, Teddy Roosevelt was in this time period and he cracked down hard on antitrust stuff. So this is maybe something we'd like to see and change with the economic system, is I do think there should be an additional economic system. A lot of people complain about interventionism sucking really hard, which relative to LF, and I think it should be like on par with LF, but I think, in my opinion, like traditionalism is like a start condition law where you're trying to get off of it. And interventionism, in my opinion, is a different start condition law where it's just like bad. It's just not as bad as traditionalism. So it's supposed to represent a mercantilistic view of the world that was like present shortly before the time frame of the game, is like what Adam Smith ripped on, which is the government being like overly protective of industry, which ended up hurting the industries and making them weaker and this type of thing. And in my mind, interventionism is supposed to represent that. And so I think that a like a more regulatory or regulated version of laissez-faire, not just unbridled capitalism laissez-faire, would be a reasonable as a law that would maybe have trade-offs between LF, and that if you wanted to introduce a variety and like a play style, but this would be part of like a larger company update. Then let's think our way through kind of the other ones. We have like colonialism is in that column. We have tax system that's in that column. Don't necessarily have any like clear complaints. Policing is in that column. Education, the hospitals, this type of stuff, that's all in that column. And then in the far right column we have, is there any laws that stand out as being really annoying? Well, we have slavery. We already made a comment about that. Man, slavery is annoying. We hate it. Slavery do be bad though. I actually think slavery in game might be meta in some regards, but nothing like just pops out and screams this law should be changed, or should be a little bit different. And so I think, I mean, if we sat down and went category by category, we could give some like more granular details, but I don't think that this is exactly what this survey is about or for. So I think we'll wrap up here, because I think that this is the last one, and then we just need to click submit, which will of course be, yeah, this email not shared, except it's shared with you. This is the email that I used to collect the disaster saves on, which I haven't checked in forever. But we'll click submit, and we'll say that our response has been recorded. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have like any type of discussions you want to make regarding some of the feedback we've given or this type of stuff, feel free to put it in the comments, this type of thing. Do the YouTube algorithm thing as well, if you like, or if you not like, don't. Notably, this video is over an hour, so if you watch this entire thing like cover to cover, maybe get up, get a glass of water, go on a short walk, this type of thing. Good for your health, clear the mind, rather than just watching the next YouTube video. And other than that, have a good one.